Okay, now I'm ready whenever you are.
A long time ago, an asteroid hit Earth and caused a mass extinction event. And that's why we don't have dinosaurs amongst us today. And you might wonder why that matters in this speech. And it's because our space program is severely underfunded in the United States, and this sort of thing is a real possibility. World-renowned physicist Michael Okaku said back in 2004, President George Bush outlined a plan to get rid of the space shuttle and implement a new space shuttle program called Ares that would put a permanent establishment on the moon by 2020 and lead us to visit Mars after that. But today, what was once a 4.4% of our federal budget dedicated to NASA is now less than 0.5%. And NASA Administrator Charles Bolden says that every year the president has asked for $1 billion more to go to NASA and hasn't gotten it. But at the same time, Congress has sent $1 billion to Russia. I think now is the time for us to change NASA's budget because the war in Iraq has ended. We have extra money that isn't going to defense, $80 billion in fact. NASA's budget is just $18 billion, by the way. So we have this extra money, and I think it should be reallocated to NASA. I have 3 reasons, specifically, why I think it's worth allocating twice the federal budget to NASA. First, the economic benefits. There's a lot of spin-offs that are in our society that we might be unaware of. Every year, NASA puts out a publication called Spin-offs, where they outline some of the developments that came out of NASA research and development. Among these things are the Tempur-Pedic mattress. Memory foam was originally developed for astronaut seats so they could sit in the same position for a long time. Hip replacements came out of NASA. Titanium alloy came out of NASA. That was used in the space station to couple segments, and we use them in our braces to get our teeth to be straight. But what's more amazing than these spin-offs are all the things demonstrated below the iceberg in this graphic. And that's all the intellectual property that NASA develops. So, for example, if they need software to run some program on the International Space Station, once they develop it, they release it to the private sector so businesses can use it to run more efficiently. Some of the most conservative estimates say NASA's payback to the economy is 3 to 1. That means for every $1 billion that goes into NASA, $3 billion of economic growth results. The second reason I have to double NASA's budget is security. First, national security. Sputnik woke the nation up by, Sputnik was a satellite, and Russia woke the nation up by sending the satellite into space, and it sent a signal down to the United States. And immediately, Congress implemented an educational act to get more funding for science and engineering education. But today, a lot of our science and engineering education is decreased because we don't have any government initiative. So a lot of our greatest minds have gone back to their home countries. Global security. You might think this idea of an asteroid hitting Earth is far-fetched, but it's actually pretty serious. In fact, Congress has commanded NASA to detect 90% of near-Earth objects greater than 140 kilometers in diameter, 140 meters in diameter, by the year 2020. But with NASA's budget cuts, they haven't been finding any near-Earth objects. And so even the objects greater than a mile in diameter haven't been discovered yet. And finally, NASA's budget will inspire an inventive culture. By having a more inventive culture in the United States, we'll see a lot more new technology be developed than we would otherwise. Professor at Cornell of astronomy, Carl Sagan, says, quote, "We're the kind of species that needs a frontier for fundamental biological reasons. Every time humanity stretches itself and turns a new corner, it receives a jolt of productive vitality. There's a new world next door," he says, referring to Mars, "and we know how to get there," end quote. So when we visited the moon back in the 60s, a lot of new technology was developed as a result of all this NASA funding, and it seems like the same thing would happen if we set another frontier, like going to Mars. Not only would the technology be used to get us to Mars, it would also be used back in the United States. We would see a growth in STEM education, like I mentioned earlier with Sputnik. Last week, engineer Sandra Kaufman of NASA said in a speech that she was inspired to become an engineer because of the Apollo landing. Imagine how powerful that was in shaping her life. And finally, culture really is the reason for this economic growth I mentioned in my first point. So we know that there's a lot of jobs created when NASA sets a new goal and they need some research in the private sector, or maybe they contract with industry to get parts made for spacecraft. But besides this direct economic impact, I think having a frontier where it's possible to achieve some new goal inspires a lot of people to be inventive. Because when the government stands behind something, like an ambitious goal to go to Mars, it makes a lot more things seem possible. And so people are more willing to invent the future. And when people are more willing to invent the future, they get excited. And this attracts the best minds to come work on the projects of the future. So during the era of Sputnik, lots of foreign-born nationals came to the United States to work on the Manhattan Project. And because they were excited about all the investment the United States was giving in this new technology. But then when the investment stopped, a lot of these people went back to their home countries to teach. And students from other countries started staying there because their home countries were investing more in technology. We have an opportunity to bring some of the greatest minds back to the United States by investing more in space research, doubling NASA's budget, and making Mars a real frontier. NASA's impact is great. Who could have imagined all the satellites we have in orbit today 50 years ago? Things like GPS navigation, cell phone towers, and weather satellites. It's true that NASA pushes boundaries, and NASA needs to be funded to be able to push those boundaries. So I've mentioned economy, the direct jobs created, and all of the intellectual property that results. I mentioned security, which, by the way, did you know we're spending $60 million a seat to send our astronauts to space to pay to Russia instead of doing it ourselves? That might be a security issue coming up soon. And finally, I've invented this inventive culture, which I believe inspires young people to pursue science and engineering and be intrinsically motivated. And as you make a decision about whether or not to fund NASA, look at this statistic from NASA that says at least 70% of the people, 66% at its lowest point, have been in support of the space program. They say it's worth it. The majority of people say it's worth it. So funding NASA really seems like a good idea. Historians one day will be writing about whether or not we chose wisely, not only just to make this proposal to go to space, but to fund it. Thank you for your time.